Hello everybody and welcome back to 4th Age Guides. In this episode we're looking at the campaign prospects for the Kingdom of Rohan in the 4th Age Total War Dominion of Men. This mod of course is set a couple hundred years after the events of the War of the Ring. It is the 4th Age, but we imagine that the Oath of Eorl would have still held into this period, and as such, if you play Rohan you will share a very strong alliance with the reunited kingdom, who is your neighbor to the south and also owns some territory to the northwest. This alliance, however, is not perfect. It is the Dominion of Men, it is the 4th Age, and so the old alliances may begin to fail. I imagine, though, that most people who play Rohan are going to want to try to maintain that alliance, and so we'll talk today about how to best go about that so you can continue in the good graces of the reunited kingdom as long as possible. Rohan, of course, is the iconic cavalry faction of Middle-earth, and as such can field an impressive array of horsemen. It also has some very respectable infantry. We'll talk more about the battle side of things in a separate guide video. For today, we want to focus on things like economy, diplomacy, expansion strategies, that type of thing. So let's jump into the beginning stages of a campaign as Rohan, and then a little while later we will look at a campaign already in progress about 40 turns in to give you a sense of what's possible and how you might expand. But I would say that Rohan is a great choice for your first campaign. As long as you keep in mind some of the things that we're going to talk about today, you should have a pretty easy time. Rohan has a great economy. It also benefits from a very strong strategic position. And again, as long as you maintain the good graces of the reunited kingdom, you should have pretty easy sailing. So if we look at our starting position here, of course you begin with the territory of Rohan itself. You've got some very strong settlements, very well built up in the Hornberg, Edoras, and Aldberg. And you also have 3 other settlements that are contributing to your economy, although on a smaller scale, in Entwade, Easthold, and Woldberg. The most vulnerable of these is Woldberg. It is a very minor development, only a rural province, and it does not have walls at the beginning of the campaign. So probably your first order of business would be to build this up to the minor province level, which will allow you to then build your wooden palisade. That'll at least hold off any surprise attack from a faction that may be striking across the Anduin. But you really only have a few places to watch out for, because you've got the benefit of the White Mountains to your south, Fangorn to your north. You do have a rebel settlement right here just to the south of Lorien, but the elves in this campaign are going to be largely passive. They're going to be keeping to their own territory, so you don't have to worry about them. You may see the Bjornings coming down from the south, but most likely you're going to see a Dunabar moving into the north, taking over the Brown Lands, potentially threatening you here if you're not too quick. You also share a border with the Dunabar to your southeast, right across the Mering Stream, I believe it is. You will have a settlement right here. In fact, we can get our emissary over to it. Calenhad. This is owned by a Dunabar, who is your enemy at the beginning of the campaign, and they are going to be busy fighting the reunited kingdom and potentially trying to take back, or trying to take Minas Anor. So you do have to watch this border. This is probably your most dangerous front in some ways, and the other place where you'll be very active is on the west, because you have a resurgent Dunland in the 4th Age. We imagine that they've moved over and occupied the area around Isengard, and they have taken Dunfrecca, which is actually a fairly well built up settlement and a chief city as well, just to the west of Hornberg. So your first goals in the campaign are going to be to push back the Dunlandings, whom you begin at war with. You will be at war with the Dunabar almost certainly in the next turn, because your ally, the Reunited Kingdom, is at war with them as well, and it's very likely that they're going to declare war on you, or you're going to want to attack them to maintain your allies' position in the south. But really the first order of business is dealing with Dunland. Let's remove the fog of war here and see what awaits you around the borders of your territory. The closest settlement, again, Dunfrecca. This is a pretty straightforward place to take. It's got a decent level of walls, a nice stockade, which means that once you take it, it will be pretty defensible with a few archers up there on those walls. But once you take it, you also shouldn't have to worry for a very long time about it being attacked. That is because Dunland, although they may take Arendal before you can take Dunfrecca, will almost certainly not have this built up well enough. And in fact, in my campaigns, I've found that the Reunited Kingdom often takes Arendal before Dunland can get it or before I can bother to get over there. So Dunfrecca will be mostly safe. You'll certainly want to watch if there are any factions other than the rebels who own Arendal, because they may come across the river here and attack you. Otherwise, though, you'll be pretty freed up to head into Dunland, and your progress into Dunland is going to be very straightforward. There is this fort here, the outpost of Dol Baran. Because it is a fort, it is not going to offer much in terms of building options, but it will give you some very limited recruitment. You'll be able to train some Dunlanding spearmen levy types out of here, which will just be a nice garrison unit for you. But otherwise, you can basically get your starting armies, and you do start with some significant forces in your capital and in the Hornberg, and scrape together some other cavalry from the other places, get them into a reasonable stack, and send them off into the west, and you should be all set. The Dunlandings, although they are a dangerous faction potentially, because they field a lot of infantry and not a ton of super elite spears, you should be okay with a pretty overwhelming cavalry charge. They have a lot of javelins, and so they can hit you from range, but if you're closing in very quickly with your cav and delivering those shock charges to them, they should crumple pretty reasonably. So moving into the outpost of Dol Baran and taking that, and then you just continue along here into Dunkreac, Dunhold, and then you've pretty much got them on the ropes at that point. Now, Dunland does have the option to field a lot of units. Their troops are very cheap, and they have a reasonable population and growth, so they can keep cranking them out. So you do want to maintain the pressure. Otherwise, what you will see is Dunland heading into the west and conquering these smaller settlements. But on the other hand, these are pretty weak. These settlements are pretty low in terms of population and development. So if Dunland does take them, it'll be a very long time before they can turn around and use them as valuable production centers. By far the most dangerous places are these two right here. These are going to be the places where Dunland can train its more elite units. Interestingly, Dunland's bodyguard is actually a foot unit. They are an infantry axe unit. So you can sweep them away with a charge from your own bodyguard, and you should again be all set. Dunland can train pikes, so they do start with some units of pikes. Obviously, you're going to want to avoid head-on charges with them, but really, Dunland battles are going to be pretty straightforward for you, and you're in a great position to knock them out as a threat early on. That does bring you potentially into a border with Tharbad, and Tharbad can be kind of an ambiguous faction on the map. They may be at war with the Dunabar, in which case, excellent, right? You can just have them focusing on the north and not worrying about you. But as you conquer into Dunland, you may find Tharbad doing the same. And in fact, once all of Dunland is eliminated, or once all of these rebel provinces are eliminated, Tharbad may attack you. They may backstab you. They may be attacking the reunited kingdom anyway. That said, Tharbad's roster is not particularly threatening. They can have some decent spears, some decent pikes, but your cavalry absolutely outmatches theirs. Tharbad's bodyguard is a foot sword unit, so again, cavalry charges against them are going to be very effective, and you can find yourself with a very nice border once you conquer Dunland of pretty much the Grey Flood. You can conquer all of this territory right up to Tharbad itself, and with some decent infantry troops holding it, this should be pretty easy to maintain. You could even conquer up to Rivendell and Lastbridge and have a nice northern border here along these rivers with just a couple of choke points in case a Dunabar has conquered into the north. You may, in fact, if you want a bit of a challenge as Rohan, try to save the reunited kingdom, because your ally in the north is in a pretty precarious position with only 3 settlements, Numeness, Bree, and the Watchtower Valmansul, and this third one is just a fort, so this is not going to offer them much production or development. It's often the case when you're playing Rohan that a Dunabar gets some extra armies because they're scripted to get some extra stuff at the beginning of certain campaigns. So a Dunabar is going to be pretty strong, and they may wipe out the reunited kingdom before you get up here. But you've got the cavalry armies to sneak up through the back door and distract them and potentially take back some of this territory and gift it to the reunited kingdom if you want to roleplay that, or just consider holding it for yourself. You're maintaining Eriador potentially. Now that does bring us to the question of how to maintain that alliance. You may, in previous versions of the mod, or maybe even this version, have had the annoyance of conquering Calenhad and maybe even saving Minas Anor and sort of replaying some of those iconic battles from the Third Age in which, Theoden rides down and saves Minas Tirith in the nick of time. only to have the reunited kingdom betray you, all right, because maybe you took Minas Ithil or something. Well, that's what you want to avoid. You want to avoid taking cities that your ally wants. And the cities that they want are going to be Calenhad, all of this, and Lathron in particular. So if you pretty much stay away from Mordor and Gondor, you should be all set. You can certainly still afford to send troops down to help your ally, but just keep them around and don't take cities. If you do take cities, you might consider gifting them to the Reunited Kingdom and then getting out of there. Honestly, the Reunited Kingdom will probably be pushing into Mordor and maybe threatened by either Horondor or Harad in the south. So as long as you stay out of their way, you don't take cities that they want, then you should be all set. Where I would recommend in the east is focusing more on the north rather than on the southern parts of your eastern border. So I would say if you head up to Fairfeld, head over to Mid-Deeping, these would be decent places for you to hold as long as you have like a full stack, because the Dunabar does like to take this province pretty early. And then once you are here, you are actually in a great position to project your power pretty much anywhere you want, and you'll quickly find that Rohan is maybe the most centrally situated faction in the Fourth Age. And you've got the economy to do a lot of fun stuff. You can really be Team Rohan World Police in Middle-earth, because you can control the balance of power in just about every region. In the west, you're controlling the Dunland Tharbad area, and you can even get your troops up into the north of the Eriador region and kind of control who's winning up here. In the central parts of the map, the Anduin Vales, you're right here. You're positioned very easily to head up and fight the Bjornings or save them from the depredations of Dale. You can head over into the east potentially and sort of save Dorwinion or Rovanion from Dale or from Rune. You can even go and fight the Easterlings through this channel between the Sea of Rune and the northern mountains of Mordor. So there's a lot you can do, and even you can head into the south potentially. Send an army all the way down here towards Harad. So Rohan has the ability, thanks to those very strong cavalry armies, to put together a stack that's incredibly mobile and also incredibly strong. So let's take a look at their building options here, because you do have a lot of them, and you'll have the economy to do a lot of building. As we see from turn 1, you're making 9,000 a turn, and that's only going to increase as the campaign continues. So in terms of buildings, Rohan is a major faction, and that means they get the option to build city development and have specialization buildings. Your options for specialization buildings are somewhat limited, I guess, compared to some of the other factions. You get 4 options, and these are pretty powerful, but you don't get like 6 or 7 like some of the other factions do. So Horsemaster Stables allows you to, this is basically an economy building to sort of increase trade in the province. You will obviously want to go for this in a financially strong province with horses. That's where you have to build it. And so this is a pretty good option for a lot of your homeland territories. I would say this might be a good one to do in a place like Entwade, because it does have the horse resource, and it's not necessarily a place you're going to be building for military. You do get some very nice military options, though, as well. All these other 3 are going to give you some bonuses to military as well as some other bonuses. Maybe the most iconic one for you to do at Edoras would be the Warhorse Trainers. So this gives you some extra experience for your cavalry that you train. And Edoras is really going to be your cavalry powerhouse. It's already built up to the point of hosting halls where you can train Riders of the Mark, Rittermark bowmen. So you've got horse archers from turn 1. In fact, 2 different varieties of horse archers, light and heavier. You've got, again, those Riders of the Mark, spears and swords. You've got Rohan riders, sort of the iconic basic cav, but with javelins as well as spears. So again, you can train a ton of cav already, and you're just a few buildings away from getting the absolute top tier. Rittermark spears, for example, and Riders of the King's House, a bodyguard unit. So once you do a little bit of military building here, you can really do great things with your, the Warhorse Trainers. And so I'd recommend that for Edoras. You also get a couple of other options. Gondorian Metalsmiths gives you armor, so improved armor. I say that, again, a military province is a good place to do this. I would go with Aldburg. It kind of makes sense from a roleplay standpoint. Aldburg is very close to Gondor, and so it seems to make sense. You'd have some Gondorian metalsmiths moving up through there, thanks to that alliance that you have. And so this would be a place to go for a military policy. And I would build Aldburg up to the highest level of military barracks as well. I kind of do this not only because it's nice to do, but also just because this is the way Rohan's military is described, as being divided into these 3 sections. I think it's in Unfinished Tales. There's a section there that goes into quite a lot of detail, actually, about how Rohan's military is set up. And there are these 3 divisions. There's like the central one, I think, the one in the east around Aldburg, and then the one in the west with Hornberg. And this is where I'd recommend going for a Marshal's Great Hall. This is going to increase the land tax here, and it's also going to increase the foot troops, so it increases your infantry's experience. Now, Hornberg is an interesting settlement. It's a little controversial that I'm suggesting you go for this, because Hornberg has potential for great wealth thanks to the gemstones and silver that are found here. So you can absolutely leverage the glittering caves that are right near here, and get a ton of income, and that might be the better option technically. But the other thing is, Hornberg allows you to train Helmingas, and so this is a unique foot unit. This is an infantry unit that can go for a shield wall, and I always go for these guys. I know they're not the best unit necessarily, technically speaking, but they're just awesome. So I'm never not going to go for Helmingas. And because I'm going for this infantry troop, I am also going to go for the specialization building that allows me to improve the infantry. And so I'll use Hornberg to be the place where I train my really high-tier infantry guys like Shields of the Mark and so on. The other one, the 4th one, is the Marshal's Great Hall. No, I guess we covered all of them. Gondorian Metalsmiths, Marshal's Great Hall. Yeah, so that's all 4 of these of the specialization buildings. Now, outside of your homelands, you're going to be going with Marshal's Great Hall or Horsemaster Stables, depending on what's available, pretty much. And so you're not, again, going to have a ton of options like some of the other factions, but what you do get is quite strong. So Hornberg, I always go military, although I do acknowledge there's a great deal of sense to going financial here as well. Hornberg, I also want to point out, has a special battle map layout. So this is something Webba put together as part of the mod. If you have not played on this battle map, it's a lot of fun. So it looks like what you would expect Helm's Deep to look. It's got the big deeping wall. It's got that nice sort of ramp going up to the citadel. Very interesting place to defend. Very fun to attack as well. Now, if you're playing aggressively as Rohan, you may not ever have to defend this, which is a little unfortunate. But that's fine. If you do wait a little bit, or if you hold off potentially and you want to attack a Dunabar early rather than Dunland, then you might have a fun siege defense battle here. But otherwise, you're probably going to be taking care of Dunland so quickly that you won't have to defend this. But if you do, just know that it will be a very interesting defensive position for you. And you might want to have just a couple units of infantry with some archers to hold the Hornberg, because that will be able to hold off a bunch of attackers. It's not as easy to hold as, say, minus Honor, because this is a huge settlement with many tiers. But it's a completely unique settlement, and so it's really fun to fight there if you do get the chance. So that's the buildings. So I would, again, go military with Hornberg, military with Aldburg, and then I would probably go financial every place else. I know maybe I would go military with one of these, but you probably don't need it, because you get the benefit of having this fantastic road system already constructed. This is the, what is this? The Great West Road. And so this goes, all the way, or it did go all the way up to Tharbad and Bree and Fornost, actually. It's part of that great Dunedainic road system. And so you benefit from having this in your territory, and that means you've got a fantastic movement range. Even for infantry troops, you can get them very far indeed. And if you've got an all-cav army, you're just going to be able to go from one end to the other, almost without any effort at all. So the roads are going to mean that you can reinforce all over the place very quickly. So even if you get attacked in Woldborg, as long as you get some walls here, you'll be in a pretty good position. So let's now load up a campaign where we're about 40 turns in, and I've expanded into Dunland. I've expanded a bit into across the Anduin, and I've started to get involved in the politics among the other Northmen kingdoms over there, taking the war to Rovanion because they've expanded a bit in the area at the expense of Dorwinion. And so I have decided to help out Dorwinion just to kind of maintain things there. If Rune continues to advance in the region, I'm going to be going to war with them, and that'll be a pretty fun matchup. Rune tends to field pretty infantry-heavy armies, and it's a great deal of fun just charging them down with your superior cavalry. But yeah, I pretty much went over into Mid-Deeping fairly early. Adunabar had taken this, but I took it from them, and I'm now in the process of building walls here, so I don't have to keep a full stack. You can see, though, that I've got a fairly balanced army here. I do know that for a lot of people, the fun of Rohan is building an all-cavalry army, and you can definitely get away with that. But I knew that I was going to be going into Mid-Deeping and trying to hold it, so I also wanted to have some infantry. So I got some axes of the Mark, a unit of shields of the Mark, some archers and levies, just to help those street battles a little bit. And once I get the walls built, I'll be able to take this army out and move around. A couple things I have not done. I have not taken Lathron, nor do I intend to, because again, this is a settlement that is really part of Gondor. It controls the Emyn Muil and the Argonath. Gondor needs to take this, or the Reunited Kingdom rather, in order to meet their victory conditions. So they're going to be coming up here at some point, and I don't want to cause that to trigger a fight. I have not touched Calenhad. I have kept armies around here occasionally to help out, but I haven't needed to. The Reunited Kingdom has done fairly well. They took Calenhad back all by themselves, and so far we've got a pretty small, mutual border here. In the west, the Reunited Kingdom did take Arendal before Dunland could get it, and so I've just let them have it. But I'm progressing fairly well into Dunland. My goal here ultimately will be to probably conquer down, and I'd like to get them as a protectorate. I always say that, but I'm almost at 200,000 Mirian in the bank. So I think that is a real possibility that I could start throwing money at them once I get them down to, one or two settlements and potentially get them as a protectorate. You'll often find that Dunland will approach you with an offer of ceasefire, and I actually accept those a lot of the time and just sort of hold off, trade with them for a little while, do some building. But in terms of money, I mean, I'm making 17,000 a turn. So Rohan has excellent potential to get very, very wealthy. I've got my specialization buildings built or being built at the moment, building up high military, high-level province stuff in my major settlements, and we're just kind of continuing in that vein as we go. These three are always kind of slow to grow, but that's fine. And so, yeah, we've got enough money, basically, to support a stack that's just roaming around here, causing trouble or maintaining the balance of power. We've got another full stack just holding down Mid-Deeping, and once that's freed up, I may push into the east and start seeing what Rohan has to offer. But otherwise, Rohan, again, is a pretty straightforward faction. You're not going to struggle too much in the early game as long as you take care of business with regards to Dunland and you watch out that Adunabar doesn't surprise attack you. Try to stay out of the way of the Reunited Kingdom, and if they seem to be a problem, you may consider buying some provinces from them. Like, if I were worried about the Reunited Kingdom having too many borders with me and not enough stuff to keep them busy, I might buy Arendal off of them and gift it to somebody else. Like, I might gift it to some other faction like the Elves or Dunland or something, just to keep the Reunited Kingdom a little bit away from me. We're allies, but again, this is a Rome Total War mod, so the AI is going to do what it's going to do. And if the Reunited Kingdom has no other enemies in the region, it's going to look at whoever borders it and attack them. And if you, the player, border them, then you are going to be near the top of that list. But so far, we've had a great campaign with the Reunited Kingdom. Although in the north, they got completely wiped out by Adunabar, so I'm probably just going to leave this to rot. I guess not going to worry about that. But yeah, Rohan is pretty straightforward. Highly recommend it. Trust in your cavalry. Trust in your economy. It's going to see you through, and you can open up some interesting options if you expand into the east across the river and realize that you can start and you can afford to start projecting your power in pretty much any direction you choose. So stay tuned. We are going to put together a battle video for Rohan. It's a faction that's pretty intuitive, but you want to make sure you can execute good cavalry charges and mix together decent armies. So we'll talk about what that might involve in the next video. But until then, take care, everybody.